Howdy folks, welcome back to Mingles with Jingles, and I have no idea what episode number this is. Is it 40 yet? I think it's 40. Holy crap, that's a lot of video. Whose bright idea was this anyway? Anyway, we're going to interrupt this gameplay footage because there's a new section in Mingles with Jingles that seems to be disturbingly popular, and we're going to kick off with that straight away. You ready for it? Here it comes. You know what it is. Once again, it's time for Wanker of the Week, starting off at number 6 with this douchebag and a Hellcat who decided that everybody on his own team was fair game, until he eventually, as you can see in the chat message, got himself a friendly Hellcat kill. Unfortunately for him, he then decided to try and mess around with the wrong Jingles. And while I would never suggest that if you run into Vojak 99 in a random battle you should fire first and preemptively defend yourself, you're all grown-ups, use your own discretion. And at number 5 we have an AMX 105 FM artillery player who started screaming like a cheerleader when his scout threatened to break through onto his position, and I saved his ass with what I frankly thought was a rather epic shot. Turns out I probably shouldn't have bothered, because rather than being grateful for it he actually had the massive brass balls to complain about it. Number 4, a massive douchebag of the Panzer 38 NA driver steadfastly camping right at the back of the map and resisting all efforts by the M5 Stuart driver to get him to move up and help them take down this last enemy tank destroyer. When the Stuart driver politely asked him if he spoke English, his response made me doubt that he could even pass the entrance exam at being human. The Stuart ended up using himself as bait so that the Su-85B could get the kill. What a hero. The Panzer 38 didn't move or say anything else for the rest of the game. What a douchebag. Coming in at number 3 we have a T1 Cunningham driver who, in a fit of rage that the Mark III cruiser stole all of his kills, first, in defiance of the laws of physics, tried to block him in front of the enemy guns, and then when that didn't work, reacted in a way that only a petulant child with the mental maturity of a 4-year-old knows how. At number 2 we have an IS-6 driver who's decided that if he's not having a good game, nobody's having a good game, especially not in the Su-122-44s who dare to get a Top Gun on his watch. And this week's number 1 is this douchebag in an Su-122-44 who thought that my pulling back around the corner of the hill here so as not to get shot at from 2 sides at the same time constituted an act of such rank cowardice that I deserved to be punished for it. First, unsure of whether or not it was an accident, I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, but then of course he couldn't resist having a go at me in chat as well, and oh well. Thanks for removing any doubt. Once again, you just messed with the wrong Jingles. You'll no doubt be stunned to hear that not having that cock holster on the team didn't actually negatively affect our chances of winning. This game was in fact a victory. Stay tuned next week for more wankers. Remember, it's online multiplayer gaming. There is no shortage of them. I do enjoy making that video segment, and you know, there's no shortage of material for it. It's the joy of online multiplayer gaming. Anybody can play, and so of course anybody does play. Anyway, what news do I have for you this week? Well, myself, Dave Lister and Ed Francis, the 3 of us, as well as Eddie obviously, who went to the Defence Capability Centre at Shrivenham, have a trip planned in the very near future to go back to the Bovington Tank Museum. We're going to have access to the Vehicle Conservation Centre, and we're going to be speaking to some of the friends of the Tank Museum, the guys who actually volunteer to do the mechanical work on the tanks. A lot of these guys are obviously ex-Royal Tank Regiment members, and so you know, the interviews with those guys should be pretty good. They have some very, very rare machines in the Vehicle Conservation Centre, including an FV4202 and a prototype Chieftain, and yeah, that should be fun. So another good museum visit coming up. Speaking of museum visit videos, I'm very shortly going to be uploading the final section of the Fleet Air Arm Museum visit. The final video is all about the Cobham Restoration Hall, which is where they have all the aircraft that they're currently working on. It's only open to the public 1 day a year, but they open it up especially for us. That's the building where they're doing the restoration work on the Fairey Barracuda. There are no Fairey Barracuda fighter bomber aircraft left in the world today. And what they are in fact doing is they've got the wreckage of 2 Fairey Barracudas that they pulled up from the depths of some fjord in Norway, and they're using those 2 wrecks to build 1 complete Fairey Barracuda. When you see the state of the pieces, you will be absolutely amazed at the work that they're doing on restoring that. Well, it's not even a rare aircraft, it's one of a kind. So that coming in the next couple of days, the final Fleet Air Arm Museum visit video. Next up, and this has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with War Thunder, World of Tanks, or gaming of any kind of description, but I have been mentioning, while been chatting on some of the live streams that I've done recently, that I've cleared out a room and I've decided to turn it into my own little man cave. And I've been buying all kinds of gaming and comic book and movie related stuff to decorate it with. And this has generated some interest. And, you know, the sort of stuff I'm talking about, I've got lightsabers, I've got replicas of the phasers from Star Trek Into Darkness, I've got models of Mosquito fighter bombers, I've got a model of the Normandy SR-1 from the Mass Effect games, you know, stuff like that. But there's one thing I've always wanted, but the price has just been horrendous, and I've never really been able to afford it until now. And I still really can't afford it, but I just had to have it. And you're probably wondering what I'm talking about. Well, there's a guy called Don Ainsworth. Back in the mid-1970s, he worked at Shepperton Film Studios here in England. And while working for the Shepperton Design Studios at Shepperton Studios, he was approached by a man called George Lucas, you may have heard of him, and asked to design and build the costume armour for his Imperial Stormtroopers in this little movie he was making called Star Wars that they were filming at Shepperton. Well, Don still has the original moulds of the Stormtrooper costumes, as well as the Stormtrooper E11 blaster carbines, which are modelled on British Sterling submachine guns. And today you can actually get reproduction Stormtrooper armour and blasters built by the same people who built the originals. And I've gone and ordered one of each, because I can. So, I've basically gone out and I've been buying all sorts of stuff like this to decorate my man cave with. Well, the man cave is probably the wrong word. I think nerd cave is probably more appropriate. And I will be doing a video of it, so you can see, the stuff when it's all done and decorated, and it's ready to be seen. So, hopefully that will be amusing. Anyway, question time. Lachlan Roberts wants to know if I've come across any wildly ridiculous laws when I was on my travels. Obviously you spend 22 years in the Navy, you get to visit a few countries, and I must say, I don't think I have. Certainly not ridiculous, although there's a couple of things you need to be aware of. For example, if you're in Greece, do not, ever, under any circumstances, mess around with the Greek flag. They have a massive sense of humour failure about that sort of thing. I mean, I haven't personally ever messed around with the Greek flag while ashore in Greece, but that's the thing about British sailors. If you go to Greece on a British warship and you warn all of the sailors, don't mess around with the Greek flag, the first thing they're going to do the second they get ashore and have enough drink down their neck is they're going to start messing around with the Greek flag, because that's just what British sailors are like. And I know a couple of guys who got busted by the Greek police. And the other thing you need to be aware of when you're in Greece is don't mess around with the Greek police. Because when the Greek police get summoned to the scene of the crime and they find half a dozen drunk and naked British sailors running around the town square wearing nothing but a Greek flag, they have a bit of a sense of humour failure about that sort of thing. And while they didn't press any charges, let's just say that while the lads were under arrest, they repeatedly and violently fell down the stairs a lot. And they won't do that again. There's a kind of similar situation in Turkey, although it's not so much about the flag of Turkey, although, you'll get stabbed if you mess around with the flag of Turkey as well. But images of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. I hope I've pronounced any Turkish viewers watching the video. If I've mispronounced his name, I do apologise. But he was basically the founder of the Turkish Republic. He was a military officer in the Ottoman Empire, a revolutionary statesman, and the first president of Turkey. And he is absolutely revered by the Turkish. You'll see his picture up everywhere in Turkey. If you ever go to Turkey, you see his picture on a wall, don't mess around with it, right? Because it's not just the police you will need to worry about. The average Turkish man will happily stab you if you mess around with a picture of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. So, yeah, be careful if you go to Turkey, right? But ridiculous? Nah. I mean, the laws in places like Greece and Turkey for messing around with national symbols are pretty harsh, but they're not ridiculous. If you want ridiculous laws, you've really got to dig around on the internet, and there's plenty of them out there. For example, in Alabama, USA, it is illegal to have an ice cream cone in your back pocket at any time. In Finland, you actually have to pay a television tax, regardless of whether you own a television or not. Here in England, and I love this one, right, it's illegal to urinate in a public place in Great Britain, but it is legal for a man to urinate on the rear wheel of his car in public, providing his right hand is on the vehicle. Apparently this is an old hackney carriage law that just hasn't been altered for hundreds of years. And any time there's a dispute between taxi drivers and the local councils, this is one of the ways they organise a mass protest. They all pull up outside the council, all the taxi drivers, and they all piss on the back wheel of their cars, and they can't be arrested for it. Britain's full of stupid laws like that. Just laws that have been around for such a long time that they've just, well, they haven't lapsed because they're still on the law books, but nobody's bothered to change them. I mean, we've still got laws going back to the Middle Ages. It's still a legal requirement, although nobody enforces it, obviously, but it's still a legal requirement in England for all males over the age of 14 to do 2 hours of longbow practice every week. Singapore's got some stupid laws as well. Pornography is illegal in Singapore. That's not the stupid law. The stupid law is that as it was considered pornographic, it is illegal to walk around your house while naked. In Norway, prostitution is illegal, but being a prostitute isn't. Meanwhile, over the border in Sweden, prostitution is legal, but using the services of a prostitute will get you thrown in jail. In the Netherlands, they're far more businesslike about this sort of thing. Prostitution is completely legal, and prostitutes have to pay taxes just like everybody else. Canada's got some ridiculous ones as well. It's illegal in Canada to attempt to kill a sick person by frightening them. Now, I mean, you know, making it illegal to attempt to kill people, you know, I'm behind that. I can support that. But why so specific? What kind of court case led to that one appearing on the history books? Why that specific method of trying to kill somebody by frightening them to death? You know, Canada, you so silly. This one's just plain bizarre. In France, it is legal to marry a dead person, providing civic formalities had previously been conducted prior to the death, showing that you did intend to marry your dead fiancé. France, you're just weird. In Wyoming, USA, it's illegal to fish with a firearm, and taking a photograph of a rabbit without an official permit between the months of January and April will land you in serious trouble. In New Jersey, it's illegal to commit murder while wearing a bulletproof vest. In Kentucky, you can't paint a duck blue and offer it for sale unless more than 6 are up for sale at once. You know, I think I'm just going to call it there. Kentucky wins. MachoGL wants me to specify more what I'm going to do to those people who oppose my evil gnomish mastermind world domination plan. What, spoil the surprise? I don't think so. James Down wants to know, Jingles, have you ever considered doing a video series on famous battles or historic personalities? You know what, James? I actually have. The only thing that's really been stopping me from doing it is, you know, getting the video footage to narrate over. Because I don't just want to copy other people's YouTube videos. So that's, you know, it's purely a logistical reason as to why I haven't already done something like that. But I'd love to do it because, as you probably realise, I read a lot of history. And I don't think you can read too much history. You know, as they say, those who fail to learn from the mistakes of history are doomed to repeat them. But in my reading, I've come across some amazing stuff that I was totally unaware of. Stuff that I guarantee most of you have no idea either. Here's an example. When you start talking about the casualty figures that were suffered in the Second World War, pretty much nobody will be surprised to hear that the Soviet Union suffered the largest proportion of military deaths. So we're not talking about the Soviet civilians who died, and there were millions of them, but purely about uniformed military personnel. The Soviet Union suffered 65% of all Allied military deaths. If you were a Russian soldier, sailor, or airman during the Second World War, you had a 25% chance of not seeing the end of the war. However, and again, this probably won't come as a massive surprise to most of you, 300,000 Soviet soldiers were killed by their own side. That's more than the entire total of British and Commonwealth deaths during the course of the entire war. But, you know, like I said, the losses suffered by the Soviet Union are unlikely to come as a massive surprise to anybody. So Russia coming first in military casualties isn't going to surprise anybody. Who do you think came second? Britain? France? America? Poland? Not even close. China came second. 23% of all Allied military casualties in the Second World War were Chinese. Because while everybody focuses on the battles, and they were hard battles, that the US Marines fought in the Pacific, only a tiny fraction of the Japanese army was actually committed to fighting the Americans. The Japanese had over 1 million soldiers in China throughout the Second World War. Who do you think came third? Again, this will surprise you. Third was Yugoslavia. 3% of all Allied military deaths were Yugoslavian in the Second World War. Britain and America only lost 2% each. France and Poland, 1% each. Or here's another statistic that you may find uncomfortable. Did you know that of all of the German-occupied territories in the Second World War, in only one was there absolutely no collaboration of any kind whatsoever with the German invaders? And that was in Poland. You know, and it's stuff like this, stuff that I find interesting, and which, you know, I love learning new things. And even more than learning new things, I love telling people new things that I'm pretty sure they don't know about. And I'd love to do a video series where I talk about things like this. And as soon as I can figure out how to do it, I probably will. Toby Patrick, amongst many, many others, has expressed some dismay at the prospect of being put to work in the salt mines when my global domination plans come into effect and I end up becoming master of the known universe. He and many other loyal minions have expressed some dissatisfaction at the prospect of being forced to work 20 hours a day in the dark on their hands and knees purely and simply to make sure I have enough salt to put on my fish and chips, and seem to think that as loyal and trusty minions they should get some kind of preferential treatment when I take over the world. Clearly I haven't explained the situation well enough. Allow me to elucidate. Being put to work in the salt mines is preferential treatment. You don't want to know what's going to happen to people who've pissed me off. Actually, that makes a good question for this week's Mingles with Jingles comments. Let's see who can come up with the most suitably diabolical and evil punishment for those who dare oppose me in my conquest of the known universe. What should we do with them? Over to you. Whoever comes up with the most suitably evil suggestion can have, I don't know, 1 day off a year from the salt mines. There you go. Never let it be said that I am not a generous, evil, gnomish overlord. Nucleus has got a good question. Do you think tank barrels in World of Tanks should have their own collision models? Yeah, I've seen this question asked a couple of times, and every time somebody asks this question, I'm always reminded of that scene from the Clint Eastwood movie, Kelly's Heroes, where Sergeant Oddball, played by Donald Sutherland, is in his Sherman, and they've caught a tiger from behind, and they fire the first shot, but they've got like psychedelic paint loaded in the shell by mistake, and it just splatters purple and orange paint all over the back of the tiger, and they're frantically trying to reload the gun with armor piercing when the tiger's turret is turning around, but the streets are so narrow that the tiger can't turn the gun around to defend itself, and they knock the tank out. And yeah, I think it would certainly add something to World of Tanks. You'd have to be a lot more aware of your surroundings. But I can kind of see why Wargaming haven't implemented it as well. You see, every time you're thinking of adding or taking away a feature, whatever it may be, from a game, you have to always ask yourself two questions. What will it add to the gameplay, and what will it take away from the gameplay? So, asking yourself what it would take away from the gameplay, well, aside from the obvious, the example I already gave, of tanks with long gun barrels in tight, narrow city streets being unable to defend themselves from targets that pop up to the rear, there's that. Machines like the Object 704 and the ISU 152 are constantly going to be damaging their guns by going too quickly over a ridge, for example, coming down the other side and burying the gun barrel in the ground, knocking the gun out before they've even fired their first shot in anger. And yes, that might be more realistic, but what does it actually add to the gameplay? And just about the only thing I can think of that it would add to the gameplay is it would be more realistic. Other than that, what would be the point of implementing the feature? And I'm sure this is not the first time this question has been asked, and I'm sure Wargaming have provided their own answer, and I suspect it's something to do with the linked collision model of the tanks. I mean, the tanks already have two different linked collision models, the turret and the hull, and adding a third one to it is going to, in the shape of the gun barrel, is going to be... There's going to be a lot of effort, there's a potential for bugs and glitches, and what exactly is it going to add to the game? Not an awful lot. And so it doesn't surprise me that Wargaming haven't done it, and probably are never going to do it. And apparently I need to offer my sincere apologies to Germany for attempting to speak their language again in last week's Mingles with Jingles. I am very, very sorry. I will never do it again. You have my word. And on that bombshell, auf Wiedersehen Deutschland, and goodbye to everybody else as well. Catch you next week, folks.